Hello everyone. In today's video, let us learn about the industrial production of wine. There's a quote which says that wine cheers the sad, revives the old, inspires the young, make weariness forget his toil. Now, wine is an alcoholic beverage which is widely used for human consumption because it has a psychotropic effect. That is why this quote says that wine cheers the sad, revives the old, inspires the young, and makes weariness forget his toil. Now, wine is usually produced by the fermentation of grapes. Now, let us look into the history of the wine. The history of the wine is not very clear. They have said that wine was first produced in China because in China they have found the broken potteries which had certain traces of wine in it. But later on they have also suggested that wine was seen to be produced in Europe from 4500 BC. And also when they have looked back into the history, they have found that in 4000 BC, they have found that Armenia was also producing wine. And after that, they have also suggested that in Egyptian tombs, there were earthen jars which were found, which were filled with wine. So they have also said that in 1323 BC, Egypt was also producing wine. In 1st millennium AD, they have also seen that wine making was a practice in Catholic Church. But in 1224, they have found, when they have looked back, they have seen that the French king had conducted a first wine tasting competition in 1224. So this is about the history of the wine. Though the history of the wine is not clear, this information I have gathered from various internet sources. Now, Italy is the leading producer of wine, and if we look into the various yeast species that are used in wine production, which are listed here, that is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, Saccharomyces bayanus, Saccharomyces fermentati, Saccharomyces paradoxus, Saccharomyces pastorianus, and Saccharomyces uvanum. These are the various yeast species which are used in wine production. The most commonly used species is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So let us see the industrial production of wine. So there are various steps that are involved in the wine production. The first step is the harvesting of the grapes. Harvesting of grapes is a very important step in the wine production because this is going to change the flavor that is being produced during wine production. The grapes are harvested at a particular time for the wine to be produced in a very good, to produce a very good quality of the wine. Now, harvesting is usually done at night because the temperature at night is very cold. So what happens during the daytime, if the grapes are harvested and if they are left for some time, the fermentation will start at that moment only because the wild yeast will be present on the grapes. The surface of the grapes will be covered by wild yeast. So this wild yeast will start fermenting the grapes when it is harvested in the daytime because the temperature will be favorable for the yeast to grow. So therefore it is usually harvested at the night. Before harvesting, the sugar content in the grapes will be checked by an instrument known as refractometer. So the refractometers are used to check the sugar content that is present in the grapes. So if the sugar content is proper, then it will be harvested during the night time, and by the sun raises, it will be taken into the wineries. Now wineries are the places where wine production will take place. They are the industries or factories where wine production is going to take place. After harvesting in the winery, the stems of the grape bunches will be removed. The stems will be removed and it will be discarded. Only the grape fruit will be taken for fermentation. So after stemming process, the third step is the crushing and the juice separation. The grapes will be crushed, and this crushed grapes, from the crushed grapes, the juice will be extracted. So you can see in this image that the crushed grapes, the grapes are being crushed and later the juice that is being produced is extracted. Now there are actually two types of wine, as you all know. There is white wine and red wine. If you have to produce a white wine, only the pulp of the fruit will be taken, whereas if a red wine has to be produced, then the pulp along with the skin will be taken for fermentation. The skin of the grapes will produce the color, the red color for the wine. The pigment that is there in the skin will be added to the wine, therefore the wine will be called as red wine. So if a red wine production has to take place, then for the fermentation, skin and pulp will be used, whereas for white wine production, the skin will be removed and only the pulp will be used for wine production. Now the juice that is being obtained is called as must. Usually the must will be turbid or cloudy because of the seeds or some amount of stem or some amount of skin that will be added during the crushing process. So therefore must has to be treated. Now how is it treated? It is the must is transferred into a tank which is called as a settling tank, where the must is allowed to settle down. So all the particles which are cloudy in nature, which are coagulating in nature, all the heavier particles or the suspended materials that are there in this must will settle down. For this settling will be done for about a few hours, like for about 8 hours or 10 hours. So once all the suspended materials are settled down, the supernatant, the liquid part is taken and it is transferred into the fermentation tanks. Now in the fermentation tanks, the fermentation will be carried out. Usually batch fermentation, the most commonly used fermentation process is the batch fermentation process. So the batches, the grapes will be put into the fermentation tank, into different fermentation tanks in batches, and it is allowed to ferment. Now the inoculum that is used for the fermentation is usually the wild yeast. The wild yeast, the grape, the surface of the grapes, it itself will have wild yeast, which is called as Pichia, Cloacara and Torulopsis. They are normally present on the grapes. They are the normal microflora of the grapes which will be used for fermentation. Apart from that, sometimes Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Saccharomyces pombe is added as an inoculum for the production of the wine. So these grapes are going these yeast species are going to ferment the sugars that are present in the grapes to convert it into alcohol. The incubation temperature that has to be maintained is so and so. For white wine, it should be 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. The temperature, the optimum temperature should be 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, and for red wine, it is 29 degrees Celsius. We all know yeast belong to fungi, wherein the temperature should be, the temperature is usually the room temperature or below room temperature for the fungi to grow. So therefore, the optimum temperature for white wine production is 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, and for red wine production is 29 degrees Celsius. Now if we look into the biochemistry part of wine production, the sugar that is present in the grape is sucrose. This sucrose will be converted into glucose and fructose by an enzyme invertase, which is usually produced by the yeast itself. This enzyme invertase is produced by yeast. Now the glucose and the fructose that is being obtained will enter a glycolytic pathway in the yeast cells. So the yeast will take up the glucose that is being present in the must, and this glucose will enter a glycolytic pathway where it will be converted to pyruvate. Now the pyruvate or the pyruvic acid that is being produced will undergo a decarboxylation reaction, where one molecule of carbon dioxide will be released, and this will get converted. Once decarboxylation occurs, it will be converted to acetaldehyde. Now this reaction is catalyzed by an enzyme, pyruvate decarboxylase. Now the acetaldehyde that is being produced will undergo a reduction reaction, where alcohol dehydrogenase is the enzyme which is involved. Alcohol dehydrogenase will reduce acetaldehyde to ethanol. So this is how alcohol will be produced. So it is a reduction reaction which is going to happen. So the alcohol which is being produced will be present in the must. Later on, it has to be clarified. Once fermentation has occurred, the fermentation contents will have yeast cells in it, it will have some cell debris present in it, or it will have some amount of grape debris that are present in it. So therefore clarification of wine has to be done after fermentation process. So clarification can be done in two ways. Either we can go for sedimentation or we can go for centrifugation. In most of the wineries, sedimentation process is carried out, where the contents of the fermenter are allowed to settle down in the fermenter tank itself. So once sedimentation occurs for about 2 days, then the contents in the fermenter tank, the supernatant in the fermenter tank, will be transferred to another tank where settling will take place. Now the fermentation period is about 10 to 14 days, and sedimentation will occur for 2 days in the fermenter tank, and later it will be transferred into a settling tank where again a sedimentation is going to take place. There the sedimentation will occur for about 2 days. So like this, during the sedimentation also the fermentation will be carried out because yeast cells are still not separated. So secondary fermentation takes place in the settling tank during the sedimentation or clarification. Once clarification is done, pasteurization is done. The wine that is being produced will be boiled at 70 to 82 degrees Celsius to remove unwanted microorganism from it, and also to remove the yeast cells that are present, so that further fermentation will not take place. If pasteurization is not done, then the yeast cells will start further fermenting, and it will lead to the souring of the wine. So to avoid the souring of the wine, pasteurization has to be carried out. Once pasteurization is done, this wine that is being produced will be filled in the white oak wooden barrels. In the white oak barrels it will be filled, and it will be kept in a room. It will be stacked in a room, and it will be kept for years together. Some wine will be kept for 2 years, the aging will occur for 2 years, and in some wine where aging will occur for about 10 years. So as many years as it gets aged, the costlier the wine is, because here the wine is going to react with the oak wood that are being present. So the oak will release some amount of tannins from it, or acids will be released, esters will be released into the wine, which will again add flavor to the wine. So because of which, as the aging occurs, the aroma and the flavor of the wine increases, and the more the aging, better is the quality of the wine. So therefore aging will be carried out. Once it is being aged, the wines will be bottled, it will be sealed, and it will be sold in the market. That is all about the industrial wine production. Thank you all.